Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is, what day is it today? Thursday. And all of our guests today, I'm hurting, Ryan, okay? I'm a little confused. It is Thursday, and all of our guests today, including Farhan Lalji, standing by, brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. Giants would like to thank their fans for their support this season at the LEC and can't wait to welcome them back for 2023-2024. Get your season tickets for next year now at vancouvergiants.com/season tickets as we bring in from TSN Farhan Lalji. Farhan, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
I'm good. What's up, boys? Getting excited for Saturday's LL Cool J concert? I know you'll be there.
Well, okay. Yes, we'll be there, and certainly we'll be there for the Lions, or at least I will. Rick's hurting these days. I will be there for the Lions, a home opener. Before we get to that, let's get serious for a second, Farhan. Phil Norman incurs a medical episode at Lions practice yesterday. Last time we checked, he's doing well. Tests all came back in his favor. What do you know about that? And Farhan, what can you tell us about the precautions that are taken at practice now versus, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, I think CFL medical staff sizes are the same, but I think they're probably trained for more, right? Because, when you look at the heat exhaustion issues, not saying that's what this was, but just, the ability for a player to collapse, and there's just such a myriad of things that could be connected to it. I do think that trainers are trained for so much more, ready for so much more, and, fortunately, in this case, they were right there. And that's not to say that our good friend Billy Rochelle wouldn't have been able to handle this because he could have, but a difficult situation for sure because when a player like that collapses, you don't know if it's a heart issue or a head issue or a brain, like you just don't know. And kudos to the Lions medical staff for being able to get through it quickly. Tristan Sandu, their main trainer, and others that were there that were able to assist right away. So it was an unfortunate situation for Phil Norman. Glad that things have gone in the right direction. And, the players were pretty rattled yesterday. And I know that Rick Campbell had a chance to go visit with them. And I think some of the other players eventually did too. So I think they feel better. They obviously weren't in mental condition to practice yesterday after witnessing all of that. But I know they're planning to be back on the field today. And hopefully Phil Norman at some point is able to get out of hospital, then resume a normal life. And then if football is what he wants to do, he can pursue that, and I'm interested to hear what the actual
issue was,
diagnosis was, and what led to all of this for him.
His EKG test came back a normal, according to co-GM Neil McAvoy. Hey, Farhan, as we move on, tough turn, or we're going to take it. We mentioned the home opener with LL Cool J being there. Do other CFL teams need to, and I know Montreal's did a pretty good job with their home opener, do other CFL teams need to follow the Lions' lead when it comes to game day entertainment?
I think anytime you get a chance to do a little bit more and to push the envelope and to try to broaden your product to more than just your traditional fan base, I think it's a positive thing, right? So, I know the CFL tried to do this a while ago with their Thursday night football games and have a concert for every one of those games. And I don't know how successful that was just because of the day of the week, right? As opposed to getting something that's a little more weekend driven in the summer. As well as outside the stadium, not just inside the stadium. So the backyard street parties, I think, have been awesome. And look, I love what they do on the season opener because it sets the table and it brings more people in. And certainly was a home run last year with not just the concert, but also the game. But you've got to be able to follow it up, right? And I think that Amar Doman is showing the way and making sure that everybody understands that you've got to spend money to make money. And right now he's in the spend money phase, and hopefully eventually it'll lead to the other side.
Farhan, you had a chance to catch up with former BC Lions quarterback Nathan Rourke. He's at the Jaguars minicamp. Tell us how he's doing down there in Jacksonville.
Yeah, he's pretty encouraged. We talked earlier, and it's been a tough couple of days not tough, but just busy couple of days for him because he got married on the 10th, and while everybody was there the following day, including members of the BC Lions hanging out and golfing and doing some other things the next day, 7 a.m. he had to get on a flight to get back to Jacksonville for minicamp. He leaves on the 11th and minicamp's on the 12th. You kind of roll the dice a little bit when he scheduled the wedding for when they did, right? I think initially it was based on the CFL schedule, not the NFL schedule. But this week has been good for him because previously, earlier in OTAs, he maybe didn't get as many reps because he was working with the third unit, right? Trevor Lawrence and CJ Beathard, obviously are a little ahead of him on the experience scale. But for this particular mini camp, there were fewer starters involved, a lot more younger players. And, there were some starters, Josh Allen, their edge player, and a few others that were there. But generally it was less experienced players. But it was full coaching staff and full playbook and full everything else. So he got every rep in the three practices. The 12th, 13th, and 14th. And that was really, really good for him, right? All the film sessions, everything kind of directed at his play. So I think that was important. He really feels like he now has a handle on the offense and what the expectations are. Whereas previously it's tougher to know because, you're not the guy getting those critical reps. And, it was interesting. We talked a little bit about the adjustment from the NFL from U.S. football to Canadian football and then back to American football, right? Because he's been doing all this work with Rob Williams out in North Vancouver. And one of the questions about Nathan when he went through the NFL draft process a couple of years ago was that he didn't necessarily have the arm strength. And now with the work he's done with Rob, he's shown that he's got more than enough power and velocity. And he said, when I first started, everything I was drilling because that's what I had to do in the CFL. And I don't have to do that here. So now he says these last 3 days, I haven't thrown it more than 80% on any given throw. It's so much more about touch and timing. So just having to readjust back to the American game with a different skill set has been a process for him, but he feels good about it now.
Well, we do know the Canucks are working the phones right now, Farhan. Whether they can pull off a blockbuster or do something to create some cap space is going to be the million-dollar question. This next 2 weeks could be very interesting with the Canucks.
Yeah, you know it, Rick, and they're busy and good for them. They're not afraid, right? I mean, Jim Rutherford's always shown that he's not afraid to make moves, and you just wonder what it's going to look like, not just first of all, there's two ends of it, right? I mean, we know they've also got to spend a little bit of money right now because they've got some RFAs and some young defensemen they want to get signed, right? So whether it's a Noah Juleson or a Kyle Burrows or a Akita Hirose, those guys all got to get under contract. So that's not going to necessarily be huge dollars for those players. Ethan Bear as well, you talked about, and how the surgery impacts that. But, we know the same names, right? I mean, we know about the Connor Garlands and the Brock Bessers and the OELs and the Tyler Myers, and some are more movable than others. But you worry about what it's going to cost to move them, right? The opportunity cost that's going to be associated with that. And you'd love to see them just be able to move those salaries out without having to offer significant sweeteners because the organization doesn't necessarily have a plethora of those, but you know it's going to go that way just when you look at everybody else's cap situation and them knowing what the Canucks are going into. So the problems they're dealing with now as they go through this process are the same ones there were before. It's just and we've got a pretty weak free agent class, as well as anybody, Rick. So I think they're in tough to legitimately try to make tangible moves rather than just bringing the band back together and maybe add a third line center along with it.
Yeah. All right, Farhan, you're with us again on a Thursday. We know that Winnipeg is your Grey Cup favorite. We also ask you every Thursday, and we'll continue to do this, about the SFU football program. There has been another development. The special advisor assigned to the SFU football program has nixed the idea of playing an exhibition schedule this fall. What reasons were given? What's your reaction?
Yeah, well, first of all, disappointment. Just generally, whenever there's less football, I'm more disappointed. And we were hoping that there would be some sort of bridge, and not just from a game perspective, but just making sure that those athletes that are there are engaged. But, there's been some challenges just because they did an athlete survey, and that survey wasn't necessarily fulfilled by 100% of the athletes, right? So as a result, it was difficult for the advisor to necessarily know the number of players he was dealing with. And so they just felt that, an aggressive exhibition schedule wasn't going to work. I was hoping kind of a softer 3 to 4 game schedule might be able to work. But look, I get what they're saying, that it becomes difficult for the university to have a full, why would you do anything in 2023 if you're not fully committed to 2024? And they're still going through that process. And we still believe that there's a window for that to happen. And we're going to explore everything we can. We've had a chance to communicate with the advisor, get a sense of where they're at. And we still believe that there is a bigger picture. So for me, I'm disappointed by it, but I'm also hopeful that when we get to September, that we do get a positive recommendation there. We are able to move forward. And then at that point, those next 3 months become critical because you want to make sure you hire the right people to run the program, and you don't want to fast track that in September because so many of those other people are going to be currently employed in a football season. So you want to have some things in place where you can begin recruiting, fly the colors, and build the brand. With some temporary people in place to do it in a meaningful way, and then make your hire maybe closer to the end of November. So we're not there yet, but we're still optimistic that we can get there. The way it was kind of playing out, the athletic department kind of did everything they could when they first canceled the program to eliminate other things from coaching and other resources and support staff to make it even harder to bring it back. So that also added to this. So hopefully in September we get the right outcome. In between now and then, have a bit more engagement, but we're not done. We still feel like we're in a good place for the long-term future.
I love how you gave us an old guy shot when it came to LL Cool J. You're not that far behind there, buddy. I got news for you.
No, I just turned 55, buddy. I'm only 10 years behind you.
Oh, no. No, you might want to subtract a couple from
about 30 years ahead of Henderson.
Oh, try 40.
Hey, Farhan, thanks. Oh, by the way, 12 years ago today, right?
Yeah, I know.
Game 7, Stanley Cup final, Boston over Vancouver. What's your reaction to that?
I was with BMAC. It was, you know how they had repurposed a few of the suites for the overflow media and people that were there. So I remember watching the game with BMAC, and you just knew in the first few minutes this club had nothing left in the tank.
Yeah.
You kind of knew. Certainly didn't expect what happened after the game to happen. Just so many layers to that day, but one that none of us are ever going to forget.
Farhan, thanks for this. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
Gentlemen, good talking to you as always. Enjoy the weekend.
You bet.